Friends, seekers, and fellow lovers of the story of Jesus, let me tell you about a secret that has kept me up late for months. A secret that, when you truly grasp it, will change the way you read your Bible forever. You and I, we share a deep faith, right? We love the stories of the Christ, the miracles, the profound wisdom. We listen to the pastors, we read the scriptures, and we believe we know the whole story. But what if I told you there's a piece of the puzzle, a glorious, shimmering fragment, that was deliberately tucked away? And not just tucked away, but almost erased. And the person holding it was one of Jesus' absolute closest companions. I stumbled upon this rabbit hole a while back, actually. I was sitting there trying to figure out why a figure so central to the resurrection story, the very first person to witness Jesus alive, by the way, is so often relegated to the background, sometimes even painted with a label that, well, just doesn't sit right. I'm talking about Mary Magdalene. For centuries, for literally thousands of years, the prevailing image, the image woven into the tapestries, the paintings, even some sermons, is of Mary Magdalene as this repentant sinner, this woman of ill repute, the prostitute who washed Jesus' feet with her tears. We've all heard it, haven't we? It's a powerful narrative of forgiveness, sure. But here's the thing that sent me scrambling to my study desk. Nowhere, and I mean absolutely nowhere, in the canonical Gospels is Mary Magdalene ever identified as a prostitute or an unnamed sinner. Wait, what? I remember laughing out loud when I confirmed this, a sort of shocked, joyful realization that a huge part of the tradition we accepted as fact was, in fact, an addition, a later invention. It felt like finding a new secret room in a house you thought you knew inside and out. It's an incredible story of misidentification, a mix-up that happened centuries after Jesus walked the earth, possibly a sermon or two that confused her with other women. But the effect? The effect was devastating. It took one of the most powerful, dedicated, and understanding disciples of Jesus, a woman who stood by the cross when the male disciples had scattered, a woman chosen by the risen Christ to be the apostle to the apostles, and slapped a scarlet letter on her. Why on earth would they do that? This question, this delightful, nagging question, led me on a treasure hunt far beyond the New Testament, into the sands of Egypt. Now, if you've been enjoying this little peek behind the curtain of history, hit that subscribe button right now. We dig up these hidden gems every week, and you don't want to miss the next revelation. My search led me to a manuscript called the Gospel of Mary. Now, if your faith is deep, as mine is, don't worry, this isn't a challenge to Christ. It's a challenge to the narrative. In 1896, in Cairo, a fragile papyrus fragment was unearthed, part of a text bearing Mary's name. Scholars dated the manuscript, the physical copy, to the 5th century. But the teachings within are far older, reaching back to the very first centuries of the Church. Can you imagine the excitement? It's like finding a letter from a loved one you thought was lost forever. But here's where the mystery really deepens, and the hair on the back of my neck stood up. The manuscript was incomplete. Pages were missing, torn out, vanished, like someone was trying to keep us from hearing the whole conversation. The text starts abruptly, right in the middle of a discussion with the disciples. It felt like history itself had been ripped apart, leaving us with only half a whispered secret. Why was this gospel broken? Why was it buried? And what exactly did it say that was so potent, so revolutionary, that the keepers of the new faith felt they had to silence it? This fragment reveals a Mary that is not a sinner crawling at Jesus' feet, but a spiritual powerhouse, the disciple who truly understood the deepest, most esoteric teachings of the Master. This Mary speaks of inner awakening, of a secret knowledge, a gnosis that Jesus had entrusted specifically to her. She's not asking questions, she's answering them, teaching the very men who would go on to shape the New Testament. This discovery, for me, didn't diminish my faith. It supercharged it. It showed me that the early church, just like any human institution, was a battleground of ideas, and some voices, some powerful, necessary voices, were sidelined. And the voice of Mary Magdalene, a voice of authority that challenged the emerging all-male hierarchy, was one of the first to be muted. Stick with me, because in the next part, we dive into the very words of this forbidden gospel. We're going to uncover exactly what her teaching was, and why it was perceived as a weapon against institutional control. You simply must hear what was taken from the official story. Welcome back, truth seekers. If part one set the stage for the cover up of Mary Magdalene's true identity, then this part two, is where we expose the motive. We established that the Gospel of Mary was found in pieces, a powerful text that showed Mary not as a follower, but as a teacher, a peer to Jesus, entrusted with a deep, hidden wisdom. Now, we have to ask, what was so dangerous about that wisdom? What did that fragment say that was so explosive that it directly threatened the entire foundation of the emerging Christian structure? It's a jaw-dropping revelation, I promise you. The key lies in understanding the core teaching of this forgotten gospel, a teaching that cuts right across the grain of what was being established as official Christianity. The canonical gospels, the ones we read every Sunday, often focus on external salvation, belief in Jesus' sacrifice, baptism, following commandments, attending to the church, rituals, all beautiful and vital components of faith, of course. But the Gospel of Mary focuses on something radically different. It speaks of internal liberation, of a concept called Gnosis, which means knowledge. But not just head knowledge, it's an inner knowing, a direct, intuitive experience of truth within the individual soul. Imagine Jesus speaking, not about sin as a condemnation that requires external intercession, but about fear, ignorance, and desire as internal chains, forces within us that bind the soul and keep us from our own divine spark. Mary's gospel describes the soul's journey after death, where it must pass through different powers, desire, ignorance, wrath that try to hold it back. And the way to overcome them, the text reveals, is not by reciting a prayer or performing a rite, but by knowing one's true self. Wow! That's a profound shift, isn't it? One of the most haunting and radical lines attributed to Jesus in this text, a line that sends shivers down my spine every time I read it, is this: destroy the power of death and dissolve the fear of it. The power of the church, the power of any institution, often relies on a certain level of control, fear of judgment, fear of damnation, fear of a punishing God who must be appeased through external means. But here is Mary, channeling the Master, saying that true awakening comes from dissolving fear from within, from recognizing the divine light already dwelling in you. This wasn't just theology, it was revolution. This spiritual message created an immediate and profound conflict among the disciples themselves, a conflict that is actually recorded within the Gospel of Mary. After Jesus delivers a teaching to the disciples, Mary steps up and shares a further, deeper wisdom that Jesus had shared with her privately. And what happens next is truly eye-opening. Peter, the rock upon which the church was to be built, challenges her directly. He's not subtle about it. He essentially says, did Jesus really speak with a woman in private without our knowledge? Are we now to turn and listen to her? Did he prefer her over us? Can you believe the tension? It wasn't just a simple disagreement. It was a power struggle. It was Peter, representing the emerging structure, the hierarchy, the external authority, squaring off against Mary, the champion of inner wisdom, of direct personal experience. Levi steps in to defend Mary, reminding Peter that if Jesus considered Mary worthy, then who are they to reject her? But the writing is on the wall. The very nature of a faith that insists salvation is locked behind rituals, priests, and external rules simply cannot coexist with a teaching that says, the truth is inside you, and you are free without permission. This is why the Gospel of Mary was banned. It wasn't just about gender, though that was certainly a factor in a rapidly patriarchal society. It was about the vision of Christianity itself. Would it be a faith built on hierarchy and obedience, the Petrine vision, emphasizing structure and rules? Inner awakening and freedom, the Marian vision, emphasizing personal gnosis and self-liberation? As the centuries wore on, the builders of the institutional church chose the first path. And to unify the countless varied Christian groups circulating at the time, they needed to standardize the story. They had to create order. And the message of the Gospel of Mary, a message that taught people they didn't need constant intermediaries, was in their eyes an existential threat. It wasn't burned with great fanfare. It was simply omitted, silenced, and buried under the weight of the accepted story. If this knowledge is resonating with your spirit, if you feel that powerful pull toward a deeper understanding, please hit that like button and subscribe. Your support tells me we're on the right track. digging up the truths that empower our faith. In our final part, we'll see how the absence of this teaching has affected your faith today, and how Mary's forbidden wisdom can be reclaimed in your own spiritual life right now. It's time to connect this history directly to your own journey with Christ. Welcome back for the final piece of this incredible journey. We've unmasked the tragic misrepresentation of Mary Magdalene, and we've unearthed the explosive teaching of her forgotten gospel, the Gnosis that spoke of inner freedom and self-knowledge, a teaching that stood in direct opposition to the rising power structure of the early church. We've seen why Peter pushed back and why her voice was deliberately excluded from the New Testament. The question now is, what does this mean for us, right here, right now, in our personal walk with Jesus Christ? For me, discovering the story of the Gospel of Mary was like finding a missing chapter in my own life story. It's tempting to look at this as just ancient history, a debate for scholars in robes. But I've realized that the struggle Mary faced, the conflict between external control and inner knowing, is the very same struggle we face every single day. Think about it. How often are we told who we should be, what we should believe, what external rituals we must perform to be good Christians? We are surrounded by voices, rules, and expectations. We are constantly seeking external approval. But the wisdom that Jesus entrusted to Mary whispers something radically different. It says that the most powerful thing you can do is silence the noise and awaken the divine spark within your soul. Hallelujah! That knowledge is freeing. The absence of Mary's gospel in the official story created a profound vacuum. By muting the voice of the disciple who taught inner awakening, the church inadvertently emphasized guilt and obedience over self-discovery and freedom. It shifted the focus from the personal, immediate relationship with the divine to a reliance on intermediaries. When we allow that fear and ignorance to rule, when we constantly look outward for validation, we are essentially living the kind of controlled life that the institutional leaders preferred. But Mary's voice, even in fragmented form, survives as a mirror. It's a spiritual mirror that reflects your own tremendous inner power back to you. It asks you the ultimate question, the same question she posed to Peter and the others centuries ago. Where will you look for truth, outside or within? My dear friends, if your faith in Jesus is sincere, then you already know that Christ is the truth. But the Marian vision suggests that truly knowing that truth means experiencing it directly, not just believing what you are told. It means facing your own ignorance, desires, and fears, the very powers Mary speaks of, and overcoming them through the light and love of God dwelling within you. This is the ultimate act of faith, trusting the Spirit God has already placed in your heart. This whole journey, this research, this sharing, it has only deepened my faith in Jesus. It hasn't shaken the foundation. It has expanded the room. It has shown me that the truth of Christ is too vast, too magnificent, to be contained by any single narrative or any human-created institution. It reminds me that true Christianity is a living, revolutionary, and deeply personal faith. So let's take Mary's wisdom to heart. Let's reclaim that missing chapter in our spiritual lives. Let us stand tall, rooted in the love and power of Jesus, refusing to be defined by fear, by external labels, or by the judgment of others. Let's find our freedom in that inner knowing. The Gospel of Mary was banned, yes, but its message was never destroyed. It was merely hidden, waiting for seekers like you and me to rediscover it. It is waiting for its voice to live again in you. If this message has stirred your soul and deepened your love for the mystery of Jesus, please don't let it fade. Comment below and tell me what part of Mary's story spoke to you the most. Subscribe to our channel now and join our growing community of seekers who are unafraid to explore the magnificent, forbidden depths of the faith. Let's continue this conversation together. I can't wait to share the next revelation with you.